What up, what up? It's your boy Django. I promise, might not always be right, but I will always be real. And thank you for showing up for another episode of the podcast. Today is a very special podcast to me because I typically don't share much about my life, how things have been. But I felt like after this post I did yesterday, I really needed to just open up, let y'all in, let y'all see sort of my life and my journey. So today's post, which is live on Patreon, as always, you can read the blog, but I always do a little freestyle here as I'm reading, is Everything and Nothing, how Drake, Donald Glover, and the art of the pivot taught me to find my soul in the in-between. Now, first y'all got to understand, growing up, my world was a series of hard borders and soft bread. While most kids were navigating the social hierarchies of middle school cafeterias, I was in Northern Virginia, tucked away in a quiet, methodical world of homeschooling. I lived in a town of 600 people called Hamilton, Virginia, not far from a lot of other cities. I didn't even realize how small the city was that I lived in. And my father, he was from Shelby, North Carolina. And my mother, she was from D.C., used to live over by Howard University. And so for me, I always felt like I lived in the in-between. 70% of my life was spent as the only black kid in the room, huddled over chessboards or playing basketball outside or doing anything. But I also was just like a reader. I was reading Brian Jakes and Agatha Christie and Hardy Boys and Bernstein Bears. Like I read 50 books every summer. I was just a kid who at the end of the day had no connection to hip hop for the most part. And also just was like, I don't know, man. Like, it's hard to really describe. I was a part of the community for sure, because when I went to Shelby, they saw me as kind of like a city kid. But then when I would go to DC, they saw me as a kid who lived out in the country. And so no matter where I went, I just kind of felt like I didn't fit. If I was hanging out with the homeschool kids, I'd look at a picture and be like, yeah, I definitely don't belong here. And so very early on, I realized that survival, or at least comfort, depended on my ability to mirror. I began to just pick up mannerisms like loose change. Like I just pick it up. Just, this is we in the South? Daddy, come over here. And my dad be like, what is wrong with you? I'm in DC. I'm like, yo, what up, Mo? I was just observing culture. I was absorbing it to remain available for any space I might inhabit. I was terrified that if I didn't wear the right mask, somebody was going to figure me out. And so my father used to ask me all the time, like, why do you act like your cousins? Why don't you act like yourself? And I just never had the heart to tell him the truth, which was that I genuinely had no idea who Django was. And so in the world of sociology and psychology, there's this concept known as script theory. It was popularized by this guy, Sylvan. And the premise is simple. Our personalities are not monolithic. Instead, we are a collection of scripts, learned sequences of behavior that we trigger based on the scenes we're in. We have a son script, a professional script, a brother script. And for most, these scripts are built slowly over a lifetime. But for me, the library was closed because of how sheltered my upbringing was. I didn't get to hear the college dropout when it changed the world, or DMX teaching raw aggression, or Jay-Z talking about, capitalism and kind of raw. My first real taste of the culture didn't come until 2009. I listened to like Mason '04, but like, I'll be honest with y'all, looking back, welcome back, I don't know that it was conducive to the culture. But I'll never forget, Sirhan Akhturk handed me his iPod and it had Lil Wayne the Carter 2. And bro, when I tell y'all I went on a journey, I was catching up on a decade of Black identity in a matter of months. Like, when you listen to hip hop that way, divorced from any level of chronological order, it doesn't feel like history. It felt like a menu. Like I was listening to everything. And it was like me looking for this script that matched my fractured, sort of multi-hyphenated life. And so for years, I'll be honest with y'all, I felt like a fraud. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I was always drifting between DC slang and the quiet, structured vocabulary of a rural homeschooler. And it wasn't until I stumbled upon the work of sociologist Irving Goffman that the lights finally came on in the last few years. You see, Goffman's core idea is that life is a never-ending theatrical performance. He argues that we don't have a single fixed identity, and instead we have a front stage and a backstage. The front stage is where we perform for the audience. We use props like chains or certain types of clothes. We use settings like the chess club or my cousin's living room. And then we use scripts, the specific mannerisms and tones that I had observed to manage the impressions people have of us. Then we have the backstage, and this is where we retreat to drop the act. It's the kitchen where I baked bread with my mom, the quiet of my bedroom where I read Redwall. It's where the performance goes to relax and you feel like, hey, I don't have to be something. And so for most people, the front stage and the backstage are clearly defined. But for me, growing up as the only Black kid in white spaces a lot of the time, or the front stage was just kind of everywhere. Every time I stepped out of my house, I just was on. I'm looking around at my surroundings. I'm like, okay, like what version of blackness should I be for these people? What version of blackness should I be for those people? You know, am I a cooler version for my cousins? Am I a more toned down version for the people I'm homeschooled with? And, Goffman called this impression management. I wasn't being fake. I was being a master of the stage. I was learning the scripts of two different worlds and realized that if I flubbed the lines in either place, I would lose face. Then came Drake and Donald Glover. I will never forget, man, while the rest of the world was arguing about whether Drake was street enough or whether Gambino was black enough, I felt a profound sense of relief. For the first time, I saw men who were being criticized for the very thing I was doing, being everything and nothing at once. During the recent Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef, the discourse felt familiar. It was the same energy I felt watching Charlamagne the God interviewing Donald Glover as he had on a cardigan with a hole on it with a button up underneath. And he's just like being himself. Like he interrogated his authenticity as if he was vulturing the culture. But I understood where he was coming from, the love of the culture while also being yourself. The world looks at a person who can move between worlds and they call them a tourist or a culture vulture so often. They see this fluidity as a lack of soul. But Drake and Gambino spoke to my spirit because they reflected the internet age. They were the first superstars I felt like who understood that in the modern world, we are just a bit homeschooled, all of us. We're all picking and choosing our influences from a global stream. They validated the fact that I could be a chess playing, bread baking kid from Nova and still find my reflection in a 16-bar verse. They weren't just rappers to me. They were curators of this new fragmented identity. I spent years being jealous of people who reminded me of Meek Mill or the late Nipsey Hussle. I admired the monolith. When you looked at Nipsey, you knew exactly who he was, where he was from, and what he stood for. His identity was like a fortress. No matter where he went in the world, he was the same man. There's just this deep, envious beauty in that kind of groundedness. I felt like a ghost in comparison. I was a shapeshifter. I would walk into a boardroom or a back porch in North Carolina or a tech hub in DC, and within 10 minutes, I'd be speaking the language, nodding at the right cues, just wearing the energy of the room. And I used to think this meant I was fake. I used to think it meant I was hollow. I lived in fear of the identity police who would eventually realize I didn't really have a home in their culture. Because Lord knows, as soon as somebody figured out where I was from or as soon as they figured out what my family life was like, it just started to become this questioning act. And so it's taken me years to realize that being everything and nothing is not a deficit, it's a superpower. The Western world is becoming increasingly fractured. We are no longer defined solely by the neighborhood we grew up in. We're defined by the subreddits we follow, the music we stream, and the digital tribes we join. My upbringing, the strange mix of Southern roots, DC energy, and isolated homeschooling was actually a pilot program for the future. I'm really the first generation of a new kind of human. I call it the universal local. I realized that because I didn't have a rigid identity forced upon me, I had the freedom to choose who I wanted to be in every space I entered. I wasn't limited by the script of my zip code. I could ask myself, what do I need to be right now to get what I need? What version of me would have the most fun in this moment? And so I really believe the world of tomorrow is not going to look like a collection of isolated tribes. It's going to look like me. It's going to be a world where people who are from everywhere and nowhere navigating a global culture through a screen while trying to remember the smell of breaking bread. I want to build a community that provides the grace I wasn't given as a kid. I want to create a space where the black sheep feel like they're the guest of honor. It doesn't matter if we have nothing in common, if you speak a different language, or if you spent your life feeling like an outsider in your own family. In my world, authenticity isn't about staying in one lane. It's about having the courage to drive in all of them, swerving. We are moving towards a future where identity is a creative act. I got the book right here. Not a prison sentence. I spent my youth trying to hide the fact that I was a shapeshifter. Today, I realize that being a bridge between worlds is the only way we're going to bring those worlds together. It is fair, it is fun, and it's finally okay to be whatever you want to be. And that's what we got on this side. At the end of the day, man, I'm about to start this new podcast called The Hyper Real. We're going to be traveling. We're going to do one in London. We're going to do one here in North Carolina. We're going to do one in LA. Like, I'm telling you guys, it's going to be incredible. Like, I'm so excited for the fact that like, by opening my mouth and saying what I always believed was true, I found out so many other people have lived a very similar life to me across countries, across cultures. Like I always thought I was just alone, like you there's a part of you that knows that everyone is wondering if they fit in, but nobody says it. And nobody wants to be the one to say it. And then people laugh at you and they, say things to you that you just can't take back, you know? And you see it in the culture. I remember when I watched 8 Mile and I saw that Clarence had both parents, that he wasn't really from the city. And even though Papa Doc was just as good as everybody else, it didn't matter in that moment. He lost because of his lack of authenticity. And man, like when I tell y'all I used to hide, bro, I used to just be scared people would figure me out. I used to just lie. I just made up all kinds of backstories, all kinds of different journeys. But like all of that has turned me into this. I'm a chameleon, bro. It doesn't matter what room I'm in. It doesn't matter if I need to speak like this and talk to you in a way that would make you feel comfortable to be able to communicate with me. So I'm so grateful to have y'all here. I'm so thankful for you choosing to ride with me. I am just infinitely grateful for you. You're amazing. You're phenomenal. You're sensational. You're divine. You're immaculate. You're perfect. Tantalizing, bodacious. Like I just want to speak life into anyone who decides to spend time with me. So until next time, I love you unconditionally. Peace.